Howdy. Welcome to episode 59. This is John's D&D vlog. My name is Jonathan Scott. We'll be talking today again about the D series of modules from 1978 for a third time. Let's just keep on moving.
As usual, as always with these module reviews that I do, please, if you're a player, don't watch this because I'm going to be giving away stuff that will make your experience less fun. So please don't watch this episode any further if you're a player.
Just as a reminder, the story in these modules, as Gary Gygax wrote them, is pretty thin. All that the modules really allude to in the way of story is to just enter the Underdark from way down here from G3 and then progress to the northwest until you somehow find a Klavdra. If you can destroy her and escape, the module is done. Because she was the mastermind behind the giant infestations in G1-3, destroying her and escaping are the basic minimums to successfully completing the module series. For as huge of an area as these modules cover, that's not much of a storyline. One of my viewers suggested that Gary did it this way on purpose. He suggested that Gary wrote only the basics because he wanted the DMs running these modules to invest most of their time adding their own voices to it. I was always under the impression that Gary was just being lazy when he wrote these. I thought that he did it this way in order to cut costs and save time. Had everything been spelled out perfectly, the module would have been over 100 pages long and would have cost the players of the day an arm and a leg to buy. I like the viewer's opinion more than my own, though. It's more respectful to Gary, and when all is said and done, seems to ring true. At the very least, it was true for my own campaign. By the time players have reached 10th level, they've had tons of experiences. They've rubbed shoulders with hundreds of NPCs, they've visited maybe dozens of different locations, they've bumped into and out of dozens of minor plots. They've experienced a lot, and it's almost impossible for all these previous experiences to not add their own flavor to the final modules they encounter. So for us anyway, and probably for many others, over 50% of the story involved with stuff that Gary never put into the book. It was all consequences of previous experiences that the PCs were still dealing with, or it was the encounters that I designed and placed on the big map myself, or it was agendas that my PCs were pursuing even though they were in the Underdark. So I guess the main thing to understand about the D series of modules, or about any high-level module, or about the end of any campaign, is how much you really aren't in control of it. Gary's writing isn't, and if you're doing your job right, you aren't either. Not really, anyway. The consequences of all the decisions that you and your players have made along the way need to be pursued and thought through in order for the story to feel right. You're still free to add new elements to the story, but the bulk of your time should be invested in allowing the story to become what it is intending to become. So keeping all of that in mind, here are some more war stories my PCs had as we went through D1-3. The first 5 war stories are in the previous episode. You should watch that to help you better understand what I'm about to say. So, if you haven't seen it yet, please go back and check out the previous episode. 2 of the players were now 30th level wizards in addition to being fighters. This made them extremely powerful, but completely inexperienced. They knew the names of the spells that they could cast, and I allowed them to read the player's handbook to learn what they could. Both players, though, now also had access to one 12th level spell called Master Zod, and they had no idea what it could do. I refused to explain it to them, and there was no way for them to research it, because it's not written down anywhere, or at least it wasn't at the time. So they were pretty afraid of trying it out. This was when they stumbled onto the Troglodyte Troll Bugbear Lair as described in the module D1, Descent into the Depths of the Earth. The group consisted of about 9 characters, each about 10th level. And as I said before, 2 of the characters were 30th level wizards, so this group decided that they were so powerful that stealth was no longer needed. Against my counsel, they simply walked into the lair and began shooting up the place. There are a lot of monsters in this area, and with fireballs and lightning bolts going off, everyone knew what was going on. All the monsters in the entire map woke up, and the players found themselves surrounded by a horde of trolls, bugbears, troglodytes, and drow. In spite of their level, they were beaten down, and the party had to flee. This was a big surprise to them. They expected everything to be easy. A 30th level wizard is powerful, but he's still limited to just 1 spell per round. And when you're fighting against a mob, 1 spell is sometimes pretty insufficient. Later on they attacked again, and once again they performed a head-on onslaught on the entire module, somehow believing that the simple virtue of having 2 30th level wizards in the group should demand that they succeed easily. Anyway, it got pretty messy. Eventually the Lich in Area 7 got into the fight. In my campaign, once I allow the group to have access to Fred's World magic, I also allow their opponents to have some access to it as well. I have a program that allows me to randomly create spell lists. So when I rolled up this Lich's spells, he didn't have many Fred's World spells, but he did have a few, and one was Lightning Bolt Mark III. He immediately used it to kill one of the 30th level wizards. Unfortunately for the Lich, the wizard had a cookie stone. So rather than teleporting him all the way back to Eastbrook because of the adamantite, I just told the wizard that the cookie stone in his pocket cracked. The cookie stone died. It had saved him from dying, but now he had no cookie stone, and he was in a one-on-one duel with a Lich who knew Fred's world magic. So he decided to cast a spell he knew nothing about to save himself, Master Zot. In my campaign, wizards who cast god-level spells are affected as stated in this chart. Anyway, here are the stats for Master Zot. It's intended to be the ultimate lightning bolt. After the player cast it, a 40-foot diameter tube was bored into the ground in this direction. The tube went on for 48 miles, 2 hexes. The light that emanated from the Zot was bright enough to shine through solid rock. It was also loud enough to destroy the eardrums of everyone within several miles of the beam. This meant that all the players, as well as all the monsters in this area, were now deaf and blind. The Lich, who was in the direct path of the blast, was obliterated. He just died. It was the easiest Lich fight in the world. You beat him instantly. God-level spells against a Lich. There's just no comparison. I also ruled that all creatures that suffered any sort of a penalty from bright light died instantly. That means that all the Drow in this entire area died. So this meant that all the foes in this area were no longer dangerous, except for the trolls. They regenerate quickly. I gave them 3 rounds for the deafness and blindness to heal naturally. From that point on, it was the job of the clerics to cure blindness and deafness on themselves and their party as fast as they could, and then to get their party to safety before the trolls descended on them. Let's take a look at the big map. The encounter with the Lich occurred here. The Master Zot was cast almost directly to the east and created a tunnel 40 feet wide and 48 miles long. They didn't really hit anything, but some people noticed it all along the 48-mile-long path. One of those who noticed it was the vampire Lucien. It was fun to look through Oriental Adventures, looking for spells that Lu would know that the party would be surprised by. One was the 8th level Wu Gen spell Cloud Trapeze, which allowed Lu to travel at amazingly fast speeds on a cloud, all throughout the Underdark. It seemed like a cool way to travel, and something that the average D&D player might not know about. In several days, Lu eventually tracked down the party. He was intrigued by the power of the spell that must have been needed to blast a hole so long. He wanted the spell for himself. Had he known what it would actually do, he might not have wanted it. I mean, as a vampire, casting Master Zot would have killed him instantly, so in the end it's better that he didn't get it. But he didn't know that. He still wanted it. Anyway, he appeared to be simply just an old man flying around on a cloud. He didn't appear to be overly powerful. Eventually he approached the group and began to try to get the one wizard who cast Master Zot to teach it to him. Each time the wizard declined. The group never fully figured out who Lu was, but for the next several weeks, Lu was pretty insistent about getting the spell. The wizard who had the Master Zot spell, both of them, knew something was up though, and they continued to refuse to teach it to him. There was never a fight between the party and Lu, but they were always at the brink of one, whether the party realized it or not. As I go through these stories, you have to realize that these weren't the only encounters in the adventure. These are merely the highlights. It took us 1 year to get through T1-4, the Temple of Elemental Evil. It took us about 2 more years after that to get through GDQ 1-7, so keep all that in mind. It was a very complex campaign. At one point anyway, the players eventually found the Vault of the Drow. They made it. When they entered the big cavernous area, they turned themselves into bats and simply flew around gathering information. No one suspected a bat, so no one bothered to detect magic when they saw one. Eventually, the group found a safe place to use as a base of operations, and they left the Underdark to return to Arcadia. They went to St. Cuthbert and informed him of all that they had learned. St. Cuthbert had no knowledge of any of this. He didn't know about the Underdark, he didn't know about Ariel Sinlu, he didn't know about the Anti-Solar Institute or the Elder Brain there. He was as mad as a person might be if they discovered a nest of rats in his home. As soon as he learned about it, he was fanatically determined to destroy it. During the conversation, the players also told him about the spell that they had learned, Master Zot. This also he was unaware of. He asked the wizard to teach it to him, and the wizard did. St. Cuthbert had never seen a spell of this kind of power before. He was very full of optimism because of it. In fact, he was so full of optimism that he decided to conduct a full onslaught against Ariel Sinlu. So he had the psionic fighter teleport him into the vault. Once he had memorized the teleport location there, and once the rest of the party was there, he took off into the sky and flew around above the city looking at it. Eventually, he looked straight up over his head and fired a Master Zot directly into the ceiling above. He flew a bit further and then fired another Master Zot, straight up. He shot Master Zots into the area above this part of the city so many times that eventually he perforated the entire ceiling, and a mountain of adamantite crashed into Arilhe Sinlu, instantly destroying everything below it. After so many blasts, everything in the countryside was now deaf and blind. Those who were lucky enough to somehow escape this immediately fled into the tunnels of the Underdark and away from St. Cuthbert's rage. Those who regenerated eventually followed them. Many, if not most, of the Drow were now dead. All of the vampires were as well. Lastly, St. Cuthbert cast a god-level disintegrate spell on the huge column of adamantite that had fallen on the city and turned it into powder. Due to this huge hole in the ceiling, teleporting in and out of Arilhe Sinlu was now possible. Augury and divination spells also worked. What St. Cuthbert was unaware of was that the real power behind Arilhe Sinlu was enraged by the attack. As I mentioned in the last episode, the climax of this entire adventure, in my campaign anyway, ends here in the Temple of the Elder Elemental God. This is where I chose to depart quite sharply from GDQ 1-7. Everyone seems to want the adventure to end with Q1, Queen of the Demon Web Pits. I personally chose to end it here. The module never says who the Elder Elemental God is, though. I decided that the actual power behind this country weren't the Drow at all. The Drow were simply serving a greater power, the Mind Flayers, and their god Cthulhu. This is where I added more to the backstory in order to make everything make a little more sense. Thousands of years previous, the greater god Cthulhu had been imprisoned on the shore of a great underground sea here. The ancient deities, lacking the power needed to kill him, instead jailed him and turned the entire mountain to adamantite in hopes that no one would ever be able to find him again. Slowly, over the years, his followers, the Mind Flayers, gave up and stopped searching for him. They became a race independent of deity. Then one day, two vampires, Arilhe and Lucian, stumbled on a series of caves and caverns in this mountain and began to investigate. Eventually, they came across the river known as the Pitchy Flow and decided to settle there. Thanks to purple worms and other burrowing creatures, there was a very convenient network of tunnels all throughout the Underdark. Because of the mushrooms which grew there, there was a lot of life that could feed off of them, and because of this life, the vampires knew that they could turn this into a home that would be safe for them. The city of Arilhe Sinlu was born. Once they understood how the adamantite protected them from the prying eyes of good deity, the city began to flourish. At one point, evil elves moved here. After centuries of consuming the mushrooms here, they became the Drow. They formed a government, they took over. It was no longer a fun place for Arilhe and Lucian to hang out in, so they moved on. Eventually, though, Mind Flayers came into the Underdark, and once they entered the city of Arilhe Sinlu, they began to sense a presence that they had never felt before. They were close enough now to Cthulhu that communications could once again be established psionically. An elder brain and a hive were constructed. Once established, the hive of Mind Flayers began designing a plan to free Cthulhu, while at the same time garnering the power of the entire Drow army and armies of giants as well. Cthulhu wanted to be free, of course, but he also wanted the planet. His main focus was getting the planet. This was when the book was created. It was a book that would entrance any individual who read it. As they read it, Cthulhu would teach them everything they needed to know about how to free him, and once freed, he would use his new pawn, the Reader, to gather the strength needed to resume his attacks on the surface world. Mind Flayer saw to it that the book was placed in a treasury, and that rumors of the high value of the treasury made it to the ears of Aklavdra, the lady of House Isleserve. Once she learned of it, she pursued it, she fought for it, she won it. She found the book, and became the instant slave of Cthulhu. From that point on, she used her armies and influence to kidnap the giant royalty and to extort them into attacking the surface world. Once Cthulhu was freed, Aklavdra had simply put the book into her treasure room, along with the 6 mirrors of life trapping containing the giant royalty. After St. Cuthbert dropped the mountain on top of Arilhe Sinlu, a war began instantly. Cthulhu had been free for a while now, and had huge armies available to him. When he was first freed, he returned to his home planet. The creatures there were once again easily enslaved and ready to fight, so he had access to them. They also had access to those that the Mind Flayers could enslave. The Drow also managed to speak with their own deities, and unaware of Cthulhu's involvement, also participated in the war. Arilhe Sinlu was a huge center of strength for them, and even the evil deities felt a need to defend it. It was war. The war began almost immediately over Arilhe Sinlu, with hundreds of pit fiends and angels and other unearthly beings destroying one another and destroying the city along with it. The players, seeing the fight and choosing to stay out of it, were still looking for the kidnapped giant royalty. So avoiding the battles as best they could, they moved about the countryside, eventually finding the estates to the north. They eventually found the estate of the family Isleserve. It was mostly deserted. There were still monsters there, mostly servants that had been blinded in the Master's Outblasts. It took them a long time, but they eventually found a Klavdra's treasure room, the Mirrors of Life Trapping, and 2 books. One was a cookbook. The other was the book created by Cthulhu. They were smart enough to identify the mirrors before looking into them. They took the mirrors outside, freed the royalty, and then almost immediately, the psionic dwarven fighter picked up Cthulhu's book and began to read it. He failed his saving throw and became entranced immediately. The rest of the party worked their hardest to get the book from him, but nothing they did succeeded. I simply kept telling the player that the book was really interesting and that he really wanted to read it, and then the player really helped me out by role-playing his character correctly. He tenaciously fought to keep reading the book. As a psionic, he could teleport away from the party at a moment's notice, and eventually their efforts to get the book away from him were so strong that he did that. He psionically teleported away, and the party was never able to find him. He continued reading the book. Eventually the book was complete. In the book, he was told to go to the cave of the Elder Elemental God. So he went. He was instructed to enter the cave and to break the great seal that blocked the doorway into the temple, but a Klavdra had broken this seal a long time previous. Because the seal had already been broken, he was incapable of obeying the demand. I allowed him one more saving throw. This time he passed it. He was no longer entranced. He immediately left the cave and told his party what had happened. So, how do you kill a greater god? The players didn't know. They knew where they should go, but they didn't know what to do once they got there. So they went to Arcadia hoping to find advice on what to do next. Upon arriving on Arcadia, though, they saw streets filled with the bodies of cherubs and other angels, and pit fiends as well, and other demons and devils. Everything was quiet. They approached St. Cuthbert's Hall of Records to find that the building was now partially destroyed and that a new flag had been placed on top of the building. The flag had the face of what appeared to be a many-tentacled mind flayer. Apparently the war was not going well. They plane shifted back to Arilhe Sinlu. The streets were quiet there as well. They made their way towards the temple entrance, still not knowing exactly what to do. At the entrance they cast a gate spell and 2 angels appeared. The 2 angels immediately began screaming at the party. "Why did you take us out of the battle? They need us." They appeared frantic to return to where they had come from. The party told them what was going on, and the 2 angels were willing to enter into the temple with the party. Destroying Cthulhu trumped all other concerns. The party also requested that St. Cuthbert himself help in the fight. The angels, though, stated that no one knew where St. Cuthbert was. He'd been missing for days. As they entered, they saw a great seal that had been placed over 2 huge doors to lock them. The seal was now broken, though, and the doors were opened. They entered into the temple itself to find an almost perfect copy of the temple that was in G3, Level 2, Areas 9 to 11. This time, though, they found a curtain behind the main altar which led to another set of double doors. Behind the doors they could hear huge, but very weary screams. Inside they saw something quite strange. It was a huge cavern that looked out over a great underground sea. All about this cavern there were pools of a bluish-gray liquid that smelled something like turpentine. It was everywhere. Not far from the shore of this sea they saw St. Cuthbert himself, bloody and wounded, but exceptionally happy. Next to him, inside of a glowing circle, was a man who was laying on the ground, shaking. As the group approached, St. Cuthbert gleefully and laughingly called to them, "Come here, guys, I got him." The group eventually got close enough to see that the man lying in the glowing circle was also St. Cuthbert. He was screaming and shaking, and it appeared that the one St. Cuthbert had been torturing him for so long that all of his clothes were soaked in sweat and blood. The St. Cuthbert in the circle then looked up at the group and said, "Help me." This is a good point to talk to you about a really helpful DM skill. You should always be looking out for good cliffhangers where you can end your sessions. If you allow your players to get somewhere exciting and then you let them deal with the problem well, they all go home content, which can be nice. But what is better is to leave them frantic to hear what happens next. That's funner. It increases the odds of them coming back the next week. It also gives them a week to formulate their strategies. So keeping that in mind, thanks a lot, folks. Have a good week. Have good games. Have a nice day.